In the digital world where treasures hide, Pure Hustle Podcast, our guide. We learn to hustle, flip items with care. eBay's our playground, we're going somewhere. Oh. From thrifted gems to vintage gold, we turn the old into something bold. Finding value where others can't see. Pure Hustle Podcast teaches us. The flipping dreams, we're on the rise. Pure Hustle Podcast, our secret prize. eBay warriors will make a name, turning junk into fortune and gain. Yeah. Turning junk into fortune and gain.
Welcome to Pure Hustle Podcast. I'm Mike.
And this is Orlando, and we're here for another live minisode.
Yeah, live episodes. Man, we've got a lot of people watching right now. Thank you all for joining in and watching this episode. We love our lives because we get to interact with you. We get to hear from you guys. And I think some of our best content comes from our interactions with our listeners because as much as it's cool to listen to bald bearded guys talk about reselling, man, when you get some of that outside input coming in from people who have, you know, way different experiences and way different expertise than we have, it just makes for a great show. So thank you for all of you guys who are here. What are we talking about today, Orlando?
So I was trying to figure out a way to kind of title this, right? I don't know what title you put on there. Did you say that whatnot is doomed reselling forever? I don't know what
the title is The Future of Reselling, Whatnot's Impact.
Oh, that was kind. Okay, so the reality is I was thinking it was like how Whatnot on the one end has really changed a lot of reselling. On the other hand, it's improved a lot of reselling, right? So Mike and I have always tried to be even-handed on things when we talk about things, because it's not all, zero-sum game kind of deal, like just has to be this way. And I was thinking about Whatnot the other day because I haven't been on it for a while. I do go on there sometimes to buy things or just to see what people are doing. And I was thinking about this, Whatnot, I believe, has been the biggest game changer in reselling in probably a decade. I can't think of anything more. We can maybe say Amazon, but Amazon's always been Amazon FBA has been around for over a decade. I think like 2012, 2013. I remember I was even doing stuff. But Whatnot in the last 4 or 5 years has had effects across the board, whether it's how we source, whether it's how we price items, whether it's how eBay does things, whether it's pulling sellers to its platform or allowing people to, find other ways to make money. I think it's just a big deal. So I wanted to talk on this a little bit. I always want to make sure that sorry, go ahead, Mike.
No, yeah, you're right there. And I was just going to say, one of the things to think about, and we'll kind of talk about as we go through this, is it's not just like us saying, hey, Whatnot is in itself the future of reselling, but what Whatnot has done is cause a disruption that is going to change the game, right? Like think about when new technologies come out, like when the very first time something like MySpace started, nobody had any idea that kind of social media interaction would literally be one of the things that changes culture as we know it, right? But that disruption to culture, it changes things. And so I think the same thing applies here, that as we see that the way people are interacting with their purchases, the way people are selling and presenting things is going to have massive ripple effects. In the same way we talked about things like AI, we don't all know exactly how it's going to change the future, but we know it's going to have massive changes. And Whatnot's one of those things where it is a platform that has caused a lot of ripples that we're going to talk about practically, but also just in general that it is going to potentially change how reselling looks.
Yeah, and I want people to understand that like this isn't just a rant, right? This isn't just us, going off on whatnot. I want people to kind of read in between the lines as how they can use this information to help their own reselling business, right? That's the goal of Mike and I. We always want to document, but through document, show people like things that they can improve or do better on or learn even from our mistakes, which we make a lot of. So the first thing I feel that whatnot created a lot of resellers in a short amount of time, right? Because yes, the kind of like the obstacles, they were there. Like you have to you have to get approval, you have to have some kind of following possibly and all this. But right now, like I go on Whatnot and it's a lot of new sellers, like a lot of new sellers. I would say people that have probably just shipped out their first few items in the last week or two, right? Individuals that they sourced for the first time and they thought, you know what, I could go to eBay, but I tried it and there was a lot of hoops to jump through. But if I go on Whatnot, I just go on a live stream, which, live stream is pretty popular, right? People do it on Instagram all the time. It's on TikTok, it's on Facebook, it's on YouTube right now, which we're doing. And so, right, they're just like, hey, I just got to show this product. People can look at it. And Whatnot takes care of all the work, right? Whatnot handles the payment. Whatnot handles how you should ship it. They have established relationships with I forget who they're using right now, but Shippo, I think. And so Whatnot's allowed this. And so I think about this as resellers, right? This gives an opportunity if you're a seasoned reseller and you know what you're doing, right? You're going to be able to, maybe source from these newer sellers, or you can provide a better product, right? You can streamline things better. You can have a better live. You can have better products there. And so I want you to think about that because I do think Whatnot definitely brought in a lot of new people. I mean, I look at individuals sometimes when I watch these, and I'm like, I can't believe these individuals are resellers because all they did is they just stopped by the thrift, picked up a bunch of stuff, and obviously they had to submit their info to Whatnot, and they just got on Whatnot. They didn't think about how they're going to ship items. They didn't think about, how they're going to even show the items, right? Because you have to think about those things. You have to think about how you're going to show your items, how you're going to categorize your items, how you're going to organize your items. These are all things to think about. And I think it's brought in a lot of people, but it's also allowed there to be a lot of ways for seasoned resellers to separate themselves from the crowd.
Yeah, and I think too, it's not just simply that these are only going to be Whatnot resellers. I think it's unlikely that every single new person who's jumping on Whatnot is going to stick to just Whatnot, right? Like a lot of them are going to begin to transfer some of those items. They're going to go to a thrift store. Maybe they're mostly picking up shirts or pants or whatever it is they sell, but they're going to find something that's really profitable and they'll be like, well, I don't really have the audience for this, so I might as well start an eBay store. This seems like an eBay item. And so, yeah, it is going to potentially bring an influx of resellers just in general and get more people's eyes on what it is that resellers do. Because when you buy something from eBay, like if you're just an average person buying something from eBay, you're kind of detached from the idea that you're buying from a seller. It's that idea is there, but it's very impersonal. Maybe you get like a little thank you card or they send you a message afterwards, did you get the item okay? But it's a very impersonal thing. Whereas when you buy something and you saw them showing it and they're talking about it and they call your name out on the live stream. So it's definitely an interesting personal interaction there. And so a lot of people who are just buyers, even on Whatnot, might be like, hey, I should try this. I could do this because they're seeing what it is a reseller is and does. Another thing that I think is a big one here, and I've been saying since the beginning of the podcast, I mean, obviously the beginning of the podcast, eBay had a much larger stake. They had a much larger power. They were more monolithic. But I've been saying since the beginning that, I don't think eBay is the monstrous, powerful entity that everybody seems to think it is, because it's not as innovative as a lot of these other companies. Like I remember when Poshmark came out, my immediate thought is this is going to hurt eBay. And I know like we had some disagreements of like, well, the eBay's still the biggest. There's no way Poshmark can compete. And it's like, well, true. Like Poshmark isn't going to replace eBay. But once you start adding all of these other companies showing up and starting to do things and innovating and trying things, and maybe it's not, maybe this specific Whatnot method isn't what sticks, but maybe it's something similar to that that ends up picking up, or other companies start doing it. There are large vertical chunks of eBay's huge horizontal platform that are just being stripped away from eBay. And again, I talk about like younger buyers. If a younger buyer is looking for a specific item, maybe they go to eBay. But if they're like a hardcore like basketball card fanatic, they're probably like got people they follow, and Whatnot is an easier way of like, oh, this is so cool, they're doing an opening right now. Oh, okay, I'm gonna buy that pack before they open it and watch them open it. Oh, look, I got this card. And so there's other platforms that are innovating, and I think this kind of demonstrates that in a lot of ways eBay's days of being the largest platform are kind of numbered, right? That I'm not saying that it's going to be like, hey, next year eBay is now going to be it's the same size as Whatnot or the same size as Poshmark, but I think that they keep shrinking in its size and power, and over time, if they don't find a way to capture that younger audience or innovate, then they're just going to continue to lose. They're going to bleed customers, and we already see that. We see that with the fact that the number of customers on the platform, the number of gross sales that they're getting on the platform isn't going up, but yet their bottom line keeps going up, and it's like, well, that's only going to last for so long before the bottom falls out of it.
Yeah, and also to add on to that, it's also given us an idea of how I guess eBay is so unable to like pivot when it needs to pivot. Right? We've seen that. We've seen the fact that eBay can't even get people to pay on time. Right? We've seen that eBay has been promising live streaming for the last 2 years, and they still haven't opened it up to sellers. Now, I do have a conspiracy. My conspiracy with that is if they do open live streaming, eBay is going to lose promoted listings, right? And eBay is going to lose, all these extra fees that they can charge on top of that, right? And so I do think Whatnot, maybe in the future, maybe they'll have promoted live streams where you have to pay to get your live stream promoted further, right? But I think eBay has it's kind of showed eBay's weakness, and that eBay is kind of like the Titanic, right? You can't move it as fast enough, right, before danger, because it's so monolithic, like you said, and there's so much going on that they can't fix things. And it's interesting, Big Dre, it says here, the co-host on Nurse Flipper said he sells on Whatnot not only by selling live, but by listing items on Whatnot the same way you would on eBay. And I've seen a lot of people do that, right? And maybe, Whatnot's going to start offering incentives for people to do that, because what Whatnot is doing when they do that, they're doing what eBay's doing in reverse. Right, eBay, what they were telling us, and I remember Craigslist Center had a huge video about 1.5 years ago, and he was really excited because eBay reached out to him, and I don't know whatever came of it, but that eBay was going to be doing live streaming, and that what would happen is you didn't have to really do any work. You just pull your listing, and during the live stream, you could like move the pictures from your listing, and so it's pretty easy. Like if you ever wanted to just sell some items in your store, you just go on a live stream and you just pick those items, and you're ready to go, right? Where Whatnot is the other way, right? You have to do the live stream and you have to list it. And now if they're allowing for you to list without being on the live stream, well, you're going to be able to do a lot more. Hey, before we keep moving, just want to say hi to everybody here in the chat. Zelzo Pug 3, thanks for joining us. Diamond Ray, appreciate you. Anik Alexander, always encouraging here. Jonathan, hello, and Big Dre, and Travis, thanks for being here. Hey, I'm not gonna give that shout out. I'm just
I'm gonna give a shout out to Travis. Travis, you are the man. We appreciate you being here. So happy to have you here with the podcast.
Or maybe that is him. Maybe that's
maybe
I don't know.
It's his anonymous account there. All right, so yeah, that's I think we kind of nailed that one. That eBay. Let us know in the chat too. Like, what do you guys think? Do you think eBay is kind of, I don't want to say doomed, but do you see them continuing to drop if platforms like Whatnot continue to grow? All right, what's our next topic part here, Orlando?
Well, it was the idea of that. This is the one that to me is most bothersome. Is it's caused huge deflation in the price of goods. Huge, massive deflation. I mean, yeah, can we say the macroeconomics play a part? I think so. But I think overall, the idea that now things that you would thrift at a thrift store, right, and you would sell on eBay, give the easiest example, right? Like let's say a Patagonia, right? You would find a Patagonia fleece, right? If it was, I forget what you call it, but there was that certain one that you could sell for north of $50, $70, $80, maybe 90, even 100 if it was a vintage one, and you could list it on eBay. But now I see these things popping up on Whatnot, and people are picking them up for $3, $5, $7, right? And so what happens is when people are picking up for that, especially if they're resellers, which most I would make the argument that most people on Whatnot are resellers, but I could be wrong. Then they take that item and they'll list it high, but hey, if somebody offers them $50, they're going to take that over to the person that found that at the thrift store for 15 and had it listed at the same price. And they're like, I kind of want to make a little more, right? So what ends up happening is this slow race to the bottom on items. I see it all the time, with like video games, like people buying certain video games like Zelda or Silent Hill or whatever, and they're buying it for like thrift store prices on Whatnot, right? And to them, that's fine because since they didn't pay at a premium, they could sell it for a lot less on eBay. And I see the scale just sliding as far as items. And again, it is what it is. I mean, that's part of business. You got to learn to adapt. Mike and I, when we had our huge Whatnot auction that went, I don't know, for us, it was a big deal. It went like 6 hours or whatever. And we made, we tripled our money. But the reason we were able to do that is because we bought it for really cheap, right? We bought it from one of our good friends, a whole storage unit, and he was trying to get out of his storage unit. But if we had sourced all those items at a thrift store, there's no way we would have sold it at the prices that we sold it. And guess what? We sold it for a lot less to resellers who follow us, who sold it for a lot more, right? But they still brought the market down. And so I really do think Whatnot is one of the biggest culprits for this huge price deflation. And it kind of ties into the next one, is that it's allowed for there to be fast money in reselling.
Yeah, I mean, when you think about it, if you're a reseller and you're going to thrift stores, garage sales, you're listing things on eBay, I sometimes open up totes and look at stuff and go, man, I should probably go through and start to drop items. And there have been a couple of times I've done like full inventory cleanouts, or I've taken a bunch of items, gone to a garage sale and tried to unload the items, or not a garage sale, like a swap meet, and try to unload the items that are, quickly at a cheap price. Well, Whatnot is one of those things where you can say like, hey, I've got a ton of inventory here. I want to offload it quickly. Maybe it was bad purchases I bought on eBay and they're just not selling quick enough for me, or I was able to buy a huge bulk thing, and I could sit on this, right? Because it always is the fast nickel versus slow dime. There's a lot of times where it comes down to time and a lot of other factors that you take into consideration. If I bought a bulk of an item, a lot of times you do what? You lot them up. I'm just going to lot all these extra little pieces instead of going through and listing them all individually for, $5 for this one, $2 for that one, $10 for this one. I'm just going to lot them all up for $100. And you're willing to maybe lose a couple $100 potential profit just for the time. Well, that same thing happens on Whatnot, right? Where people are going, they go to the Goodwill bins, they go to a thrift store, and they just load up on a ton of items. And they go, I'm going to sell majority of these items tonight. And maybe I'm only making 25% of what I could make on them, but I'm going to have the money today. And then I don't have to necessarily wait the next 3 years to realize this profit, because some of these items might sell this month and some might take several years. And I'd rather have a little bit less quicker. And if I can keep doing that and doing it at that volume, that's fine with me, because I want the money quick. And so some people are again trying to offload things, so they're just moving stuff they've already purchased, or they're just willing to run with a model where they're going and they're buying things for dirt cheap. They're selling it for a little bit less than dirt cheap, just because they're still making a markup, but they're not wanting to do the waiting. And so yes, that does cause that deflation in prices in some ways. But if you're a reseller and you're like, you know what, right now, if I was like, I need $1,000 to make this payment, or I need a down payment for a car, and whatever it is, and if you're like, I needed that money, I could go on Whatnot right now, find some inventory, and within a few hours have $1,000 worth of inventory sold. It might have been $4,000 worth of inventory if I'd have waited on eBay, but I could get that money pretty quickly.
Yeah, and if you have more than 1,000 items sold, you can get it the next day, right? Usually your payout if you sold under 1,000 is a week, right? It has to get delivered and people have to say they got it. But if you've sold over 1,000 items on Whatnot, the payment's the next day. Right. So right now I'm looking, I have a bunch of totes of clothing. If I wanted to right now, I could just go on Whatnot and I can make a few $100 really fast and get that payout. And so this is one of the reasons I think Whatnot's disrupted things, where, eBay, like you could be, like you said, you could be waiting forever. And even now with eBay, you got to wait 3-4 days, right? They hold that money for a little while. They don't pay you out, and you got to wait until that payout. Jonathan brings an interesting question here. Says, what do you guys think of Commonwealth platform called Commons. Okay, so I don't have anything negative against it. I know a lot of people have negative that it's just, it's influencers using the platform to make money off other resellers who watch them. And now there is truth to that in the sense that they do get they get a cut, right? I think they get like out of the 10% that Commons charges, they get 5% of that to themselves. And so if you have a big following, I think it's a great thing, right? You get other people under you, right? And you get the fees from them. But I see it as a positive thing if it's another platform that you can get other eyes on your items, right? And the fees aren't too great. And on top of that, maybe you get yourself, let's say under Commonwealth's umbrella, and there's a lot of people that are looking for a certain kind of item. It's kind of like going into a Facebook group and selling in a Facebook group, right? The people are already there. And so I don't know. I'm kind of ambivalent to it. I'm not negative about it. I'm not positive about it. I think it could be used for good. And I think it's a positive thing, but is it for everybody? I don't know. That depends on where you're at. If you believe people will have the willingness to buy the items that you list on there. Now, this last one, this might be a little controversial, but I remember back in the day when I used to listen to Scavenger Life, they would talk about how eBay is like the flea market or the swap meet of everything, and I used to be like, no, it's not. It just really isn't, right? Because whenever I think of a swap meet or I think of flea market, right? I think of everybody trying to I think people just trying to scam people, right? That's what I think sometimes, right? Because when you go, I remember when I would go, people would try to sell me stuff all the time for top dollar, and you really have to know what you're gonna buy, right? But they would try to sell things en masse, right? They would try to sell things with a lot of quantity. And I think this is kind of like the equivalent of you going to the swap meet and you paying $40 for your space so you can spend the next day or 2 or 3 and sell all your items real quick. Instead, now you have a larger audience, maybe depending on where you're located. Like in San Diego, Kobe Swami has thousands of people that come through. So you may be better off just paying, I forget what it's now, it's maybe $50 for your space and bringing all your stuff from your latest haul. But if you're in a small town or, you're in another part that doesn't get a lot of traffic at the Swami, maybe going on Whatnot will bring those eyes. Obviously, social media following plays a part, but hey, you have the opportunity to sell those goods. And as a reseller, you have the opportunity of buying a lot of goods that you can resell for good money.
Yeah, I kind of like that analogy you had of the difference of when you're going, you buy a spot, you're there for a couple of days, you're trying to sell everything you can at your booth as much as you can. That is more common of a swap meet. And yeah, that's kind of like Whatnot is in that sense. I think what maybe separates too is the fact that you can be really niche down. Like they're it's like you get to pick which booth you go to. Like you go to a swap meet and there's the cologne booth, and then there's the garage sale booth where it's leftovers, and then there's the person selling Chinese mass toys that they bought, basically Temu store. So you kind of get that same aspect on Whatnot, and it's a little bit more store specific than eBay. eBay is kind of like a thrift or a flea market in the sense of you can pretty much find anything you're looking for, but you're not necessarily going to a booth. It's when I go to your store, if I go to your store, it's I'm standing at your booth, okay, what do you have available? And you're trying to move those items as quick as you can. And yeah, you're not doing the eBay model of I'm going to list this and let it sit. More like a store that people are walking into or looking, it's a little different. So yeah, I definitely see that aspect. What I kind of would say is even maybe not so much the whole swap meet flea market thing, but man, and I haven't been on as frequently, but I still feel like it's the Wild West with the almost near gambling that people do, the games people play, where it's it's almost like you're betting on what's going to be in this. And I'm going to open this, and I opened up this pack and I had this card, so I'm going to move this marker up 3 spots. And if you bought this marker, then you're going to be getting this pack over here. But now this marker's gotten, it's almost like that old horse game where you roll the dice and the horse move up. It's you see people doing the most random things. It's if you're not in the know of how this works, you're just what is happening on this Whatnot right now? This is bonkers.
So, and it's brought entertainment to the reselling space, right? Which I think that's the direction we're moving in. I think that's what eBay's trying to do, with trying to get you to make your stores look really good to eventually do live streaming. And I think Whatnot has created that, right? Because people have these nice displays for their Whatnot, and I don't know, maybe people do comedy shows on Whatnot eventually. I don't know what's going on, but I agree with you. It is the Wild West. And I agree with Dre. Dre here says I still prefer the flea market to liquidate over whatnot, but if there's ever things ever dry up, then maybe I'll do whatnot, but I'd rather not. And that's the thing, you got to find what works for you, right? If you have it where you
maybe that should be our phrase, whatnot, but I'd rather not.
Yeah, well, that's what happened to us. That's what happened to me. I mean, I think earlier on in the year, I had this plan of every week on Thursday, I was going to do a whatnot. And I did it for 5 or 6 months. Not 5 or 6, 5 or 6 weeks. And I was just like, wait a second. Like, I only made a few $100s. And actually, some of these whatnot items that didn't sell on whatnot, I sold for more money than I made in total on whatnot. Like, it just wasn't for me. Right. So you got to figure out what works for you. But the main goal of this was to help you understand, like, hey, there's different ways that you can approach whatnot, right? It could make you quick money. It could allow you to source goods. It could allow you to even network. There's a lot of networking that goes on whatnot. There's lots of possibilities, whatnot. So just think it through. Hey, we got to run. It's a mini-sode. We're almost going into full episode mode, but appreciate everybody tuning in. And with that being said, make sure to be real,
be relevant,
and be reselling leads.
Peace.